Hey, what's up everybody? It's Spunkovai here on behalf of MMOBomb.com. Sounds like I got punched there, and welcome back to the Free to Play Podcast, episode 98. Today is February 9th, 2014, just 5 days away from the big old Valentine's Day. And do you have any special plans with someone? Are you meeting up with someone in an MMO? Going to be passing around some emotes and flowers and whatnot? Here to tell us his plans for Valentine's Day, Jason Winter. How's it going?
Oh, geez. Well, my plans, my girlfriend and I have decided we're not going to really do anything special.
Really? You're not going to do anything special?
The terrible thing about it is our birthdays land right on each end of Valentine's, so to try to shove something else in there would just be, yeah.
You could just make it like a triple day extravaganza, you know?
Yeah, see, we already had Christmas, and then my birthday was last month, and her birthday's in a couple weeks, so yeah, it's like, eh.
Well, you're just a bunch of party poopers, and no, I'm just kidding. Who can afford Valentine's Day in this economy? But I haven't figured out what I'm gonna do. I think I may do the same thing. Just lay low there, you know, a car.
With your girlfriend?
My girlfriend.
Don't tell your wife.
Don't tell my. Yeah, of course. I forget. I have how many of them? I don't know. Anyways, guys, we've got a lovely episode. See what I did there for you guys as well. Talking a little bit about Elder Scrolls Online. Why are we talking about that? Isn't that a pay-to-play MMO? We'll get into that in just a little bit. Transformers Universe having a little bit of a shake-up. We're going to talk about that this week. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about Black Desert, the fabled sandbox MMORPG with amazing graphics, set to be released by Prolibis. They have some localization update news in regards to that, and so stick around for that discussion as well. Of course, we also have your weekly bombs as well as comments about our question of the week. And so we've got a full platter, if you would, for today's episode. So looking forward to all of that, and why don't we go ahead and dive right in. Alright, so first things first, we're going to be talking a little bit about Elder Scrolls Online, of course. That game, that MMO, is set to be released fairly soon. We've had not so much hype as it is information released about it in sort of musings and opinions. Generally what I'm hearing a lot through the grapevine and through players is that it seems like it's headed down a little bit of a path of SWTOR. Not in the sense that it has the same game mechanics maybe, but just in the sense that it has this really well-known IP. It may be playing it a little bit too safe with the mechanics. Now, here to talk a little bit about his opinion, having actually played an extensive amount of Elder Scrolls Online, Jason Winter, go ahead and tell me why I am right and at the same time I'm wrong about this being similar to SWTOR.
I believe you're right with the overall notion of it, that it is going to be kind of like SWTOR in that, yeah, it is massively hyped. It's got probably a lot of money behind it, famous IP, and I think it's not going to do nearly as well as what people, or what at least they think it's going to be. And I think a lot of people have mused the same thing, that it probably is going to go at least buy to play, maybe free to play in not too long a time. I just did a little survey on my Twitter not too long ago, just to see, and you know, it's whatever, it's a survey, and only 29 people voted on it, but 20 of those 29 thought it'll go free to play less than a year after launch. So we might be talking about it eventually.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think it's because it doesn't do anything different, or because it's the same as Star Wars. Like you said, not the same gameplay, and I don't think it's even not that they're not taking risks. I think, and I compare this a lot in this article I wrote, I compared it to the Secret World in a lot of ways. I think it does a fair number of different things in terms of MMOs. It's got kind of that MMO, a little bit of an Elder Scrolls Skyrim kind of blend to it.
Well, you could argue that SWTOR did a little bit of a different thing with the sort of talking dynamics of that.
I wouldn't. I mean, apart from the personal story, yeah, the story bit was good, but that was such a small part of the game. It seemed like 90% was just WoW clone.
Okay, so you're saying the Elder Scrolls Online does more than just, you know, the lore aspect of it.
Yeah, actually, I mean, the story is, in my opinion, a little weak, just because it's the same thing for everybody mostly. Because you're got your thing with the prophet, and you're the soul was stolen by Molag Bal, whatever. Haven't gotten that far into it, but I've done a little bit of each of the three factions, and you know, the individual parts are a little different, and that's nice. But it's not a really personal thing. It doesn't seem like it's because, you know, like being a trooper or an Imperial agent or a Sith or whatever.
So what is Elder Scrolls Online doing right then? in? What could possibly keep it as pay to play?
I think the license really is just a big part of it. I think there's going to be just a lot of people who want to play it and who are going to be willing to do it because of the huge success of Skyrim and other Elder Scrolls games before it. And I think that one of the things working against it is the fact that, like I said, it is kind of different. And it's going to take and people are having expectations one way or the other. Like I said to a friend, half the people are expecting it to be an MMO, half the people are expecting it to be Skyrim, and they're probably both going to be pissed off that it's not exactly what they want. Mm-hmm. It's like I said, like I compared it to the Secret World, where they did a lot of cool things in there, but a lot of them were a little off the beaten path of what you expect out of an MMO, in that they didn't always just tell you where to go, what to do. But on the other hand, it wasn't this totally wide open sandboxy kind of game, and I think that put a lot of people off. I think it's like it went to one direction. It couldn't really decide which direction it really wanted to go and tried to appeal to everybody, and therefore had a little difficulty being a really big thing for anyone. Obviously, Secret World was not meant to be a huge, millions of players game, but
even still, it's still not free to play.
True. Like I said, that's why I said I think buy to play is going to be a more likely result for it for the Elder Scrolls Online. Again, because it's going to feel like, when you play Skyrim, you buy it for $60 or whatever it is now, and that's it. There's no more payment on it. I think that's going to be a more likely route for this.
For sure. One thing that I sort of was curious about is the fact that while SWTOR may have been sort of like a WoW clone in that, you had the discussion points, and that's fairly it. Elder Scrolls Online did have a few things like the minimalistic UI, the sort of branching class system slightly, the ability to do first person, and it seemed like it offered just a little bit more of a variety of things, even if at the core the mechanics were still go, kill this, collect that, etc. But with the addition of these sort of cross-platform support for the Xbox One and so on, I'm really curious whether or not that just sort of makes up for the fact that it's a lackluster MMO on the baseline in terms of, at its very core, it's not hugely great at being either an MMO or an Elder Scrolls game. But because you have the fan base sort of like saturated across all the consoles, this cross-platform support, is it maybe not as noticeable. Because if you just had it on PC, you're just dealing with PC players like SWTOR is, versus Elder Scrolls, which maybe can deal, can soften the blow, if you will, by having the game accessible by all these variety of platforms. What do you think about that?
That probably is going to help, but it's like you say too, like I said before, it's the console players are going to go in maybe expecting one thing, and granted, there are more MMOs on consoles than there used to be, but I still think most people don't buy consoles to get MMOs, and people who play Elder Scrolls games on consoles aren't necessarily MMO players, so it's still going to be a bit of an adjustment for them to get used to MMO dynamics, and of course the sub fee. If there's going to be one of those, that's going to be something else somewhat foreign. At least the amount of it's going to be foreign. Obviously, people have their PlayStation Gold or Xbox Live or whatever, so they're used to paying a fee for something. But to have $15 possibly on top of that is going to feel a little difficult maybe for some people. So it'll help. I mean, having it on those consoles where they've sold many millions of copies is going to get them some more, and might. I think that's going to be if they do make a change in their payment model. I think the fact that they're on consoles is what's going to let them stay for longer than, like you said, than you might normally expect. Because Star Wars: Old Republic did it after less than a year. This will probably be a little longer than that, if at all.
What I'm curious is, I feel as though Star Wars: The Old Republic lasted as long as it did pay to play because of the fact that people initially jumped on board because it was Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Much like in the same, I feel people are going to jump on board because it's Elder Scrolls Online. It's Elder Scrolls. The question really comes down to, other than the Star Wars sort of environment and the quest lines, SWTOR didn't really feel like a Star Wars game, if you will. Like you said, it felt like a WoW clone. Whereas at least Elder Scrolls Online feels a little bit like Skyrim, or feels a little bit like an Elder Scrolls game. Do you think that is going to have a pretty big determining factor as to how long the game will still appeal to Elder Scrolls fans, or to fans of that world? Because if you look at it, for example, once Star Wars went free to play, people really didn't care so much about mechanics, maybe because of the fact that now I can just play it, I can enjoy it for what it is. Yeah, it's got these faults, but it's free, right? Whereas previously you couldn't justify the cost. With Elder Scrolls Online, do you feel like everything that it adds that makes it more Elder Scrolls-like, do you feel that those really add to the justifiable cost, or do you feel like once the game goes free to play, if it does go to free to play, that players will be like, yeah, these are just like a nice little additions on top of this sort of generic fantasy MMO?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be another factor that helps keep it pay to play longer and keeps it popular because you're right, it does. And some people are going to be like, oh, geez, I can't do everything. I can't go and murder every person or pick everyone's pockets or completely loot every house and pick up every book, whatever.
Put
It's like,
cheese wheels in everybody's house and
yeah,
buckets
there
on
you go,
people's
there you
heads.
go. Have mods that spawn a million cheese wheels and watch
Yeah.
them roll down the mountain. Yeah, people are going to be upset that you can't do all that stuff because it's a multiplayer game. You just can't unbalance it to that extent. And I
Well, you
mean,
can, but
well,
there's
sure,
repercussions.
well, I've seen some of the stuff people have crafted, like a mace that does 800 damage a hit. It's like, yeah, sure, you're not going to be able to craft anything like that. But I mean, you just got to get over that. I mean, there's that we've known that from the beginning. We've known that for almost 2 years now. That it's not going to be as completely and 100% absolutely wide open as Elder Scrolls is now. That said, the fact that they've been kind of tight with their PR and with allowing information to come out maybe works against them on that point because maybe much as we like to think, well, everybody knows Elder Scrolls Online is coming out, there are people who don't know or who haven't followed it, don't know what's going on, and just are going to see it and be like, oh, hey, an Elder Scrolls game and it's an MMO, great, I'm going to pick it up, going to get in and be like, well, I can't murder everybody, this sucks. So
The one thing I think also that works against it is because some people know it's an MMO, it works contrary directly to what they feel an Elder Scrolls game should be, so that they're not going to play it. When you think of SWTOR,
that's the other side of it, of course. Like you said, some people think it's Elder Scrolls, some people think it's MMO, and which one is it? Well, yeah.
and that's why I was saying if it went free to play, then people would be less inclined to criticize the fact that it's Elder Scrolls and it's set in MMO, and just sort of accept the fact that it's a fantasy-based MMO with these elements. Just like people sort of just got over the fact that SWTOR was Star Wars related and just said, okay, it's this sci-fi MMO. It's got these okay redeeming qualities like this and that. I feel like that's why some of the people actually played at that point. So I'm curious to see how many people play Elder Scrolls Online if it does end up free to play, not for it being Elder Scrolls Online, but just because it's just this pretty decent, okay, fantasy MMORPG that's got these, sort of unique aspects to it. We'll see how that actually plays out. But I'm really curious to see how much consoles actually play a part in adding to the entire player population and how
it's going to be interesting, though, to wonder how that, because, again, I think one of the issues talk about with SWTOR, I think one of the reasons that it did as well after it went free to play is people knew what to expect after that point. Like I said, they're not sure about that with Elder Scrolls, maybe in some cases, whereas it's going to be interesting because the console release is going to be like 2 months after PC.
Mm-hmm.
By then, everyone will have, a lot of people will have played it. A lot of people on PC. They'll have all their opinions. There'll be tons of videos on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
So for positive or negative, that's going to impact the console launch. If people see that they think it's terrible, that's going to hurt it. If they think it's going to be great, that's going to make it better, make it sell more. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes.
We also have, of course, EverQuest Next that's going to be released on PlayStation 4 as well. So it'll be curious to see how these two separate sort of cross-platform-ish, MMOs on consoles do, one being completely pay-to-play like the traditional model, and then one being completely free-to-play. Obviously, they're going to have different audiences, but they're both ambitious in their own ways. And so in that respect, I'm kind of going to be interested to see which one ends up having in the long run, a sort of surge in players, if you will. Which one will actually have the content to back it up, because that really is what it comes down to. We don't really have too much information in regards to late game content in Elder Scrolls Online, which was a big reason or issue for players in SWTOR, is that when they got to the late game, there was nothing to do. There wasn't that much stuff to start with, and so we don't really know too much about Elder Scrolls Online's late game. So certainly if there's not a lot there, then players may start dropping off a lot earlier as well. So.
The one thing I will say is that it is pretty slow to level in the game, so hopefully that'll keep people, doing that more so than for a little longer.
Is it work sort of like Skyrim in the sense that you do a certain action or something and then you get leveling points for that, or is it more like a straight linear progression bar?
It's odd that it's actually both. Like your skills will go up as you like your different skills in destruction staff or alchemy if you're doing that, or two-handed sword or your class skills as you use them. Actually, as you do stuff while you have them on your bar, basically. But then you also have like generic XP that you gain that figures your overall character level.
We'll have to see how that plays out. It certainly seems like it has a little bit more variety than SWTOR did at the time. So that, of course, like we talked about, is going to be in his favor. But overall, if it does end up going to free-to-play, the question then remains at that time, whenever it does go to free-to-play, let's say something goes wrong and it goes 2015 free-to-play. We're Nostradamus and we predicted it all along or something.
You said it, not me.
Yeah. 2015. I'm going to say it now. 1 year. No, okay. We'll give it a year and a half. We'll give it a year.
Well, a year and a half would still be 2015.
Yeah, still be 2015. So
whatever.
But just with technicalities, a year and a half. But yeah, say it goes free to play then. I totally forgot what point I was going to make because I just went down the pathway of it being halfway through 2015. But yeah, we'll see exactly how it plays out, and I'll be watching intently. And now moving along, we're going to talk about another MMO, or I should say it was an MMO, no longer known as an MMO, now known as Prince. I don't know. That's a different thing. Transformers Universe. It's no longer an MMO. It was, of course, released or announced, rather, by Jagex back in the late December of 2012. And then they just sort of dropped off the face of the earth and didn't talk about it for pretty much most of 2013. And only now they sort of coming out and announcing that, hey, it's not a MOBA anymore. We're now a MOTA.
MOTA.
Motorola.
Not to be confused with former Pirates and Dodgers outfielder Manny Mota.
Manny Mota. What else is MOTA? Like Motorola or Mota Madness? See,
that's stretching a little bit, maybe.
I've named the post Mota Madness, so I'm gonna stick with that.
Urban Dictionary says Mota is slang for marijuana.
Okay, well there you go. It's now marijuana. Transformers Universe is now okay. All right, that's nice.
Or possibly, according to Wikipedia, a member of the Orthodontic Technicians Association.
Oh, there you go. Certainly not a game by any stretch. So yeah, MOTA or MOBA, depending on who you talk to, is a new mode. But it's sort of interesting that Transformers Universe and Jagex sort of chose this path for it, because to me, as a Transformers fan, it's sort of a slap in the face. But that's just me, because I was actually sort of looking forward to, even if it was browser-based, because we've seen Unity Engine really push browser-based games pretty far, and Jagex certainly isn't a small developer and isn't someone who is new to MMOs. So I was hopeful. I was, at least optimistic some about it. But it seems like, due to the recent cuts in employee staff there working on the project, it's now been downgraded to a MOTA. And yes, PR hype will say it's still, awesome and what have you, but I still am a little bit upset that it's no longer an MMO. I mean, how cool would that be? An MMO of Transformers? So a MOTA, a massively online tactical action game. They didn't say arena, it's tactical action.
Well, but that's not a... There needs to be a noun. If it's a massively online tactical action game, then it's a MOTAG.
I know, but they say it's a MOTA. They say
massively online tactical action.
Action. And in the game, but the G isn't part of it.
The G is silent.
The G is silent and invisible. It's both. So yeah, it's a MOTA. Basically, they haven't revealed too many details regarding it. They say that you'll be able to control a bot as a squad around you, and of course, you'll be able to assume either as a Decepticon or as an Autobot. And have these bots be customizable, and they're controllable as like this squad. So it's a little bit different than a standard MOBA, if you will. It doesn't sound like you'll be going down a lane with just minions following you. It does sound like they actually will sort of take up positions around you and fight with you, which could actually play out pretty interestingly in terms of how it looks. You can imagine just like an actual Decepticon or like War of Cybertron more, with people just fighting across battlefields and explosions and little minions tearing each other apart. I can see that. But it's still, to me, it kind of seems a little bit bittersweet in the sense that I feel like developers are starting to head down the path where they view the MOBA genre as like the sloppy seconds. Where they're like, okay, we don't have enough money to complete this project how we wanted to. Let's just turn it into a MOBA.
Because League of Legends and Dota 2 are really huge. We can just make them one like that, and people will flock to it.
I don't know if it's just like more cost. Well, obviously I think a
Yeah, I
MOBA would
think
be
I
more
mean just
cost
because
effective than an MMO, of course.
yeah, I mean there's less to it to be perfectly honest. I mean League of Legends has like what one map that people play all the time mostly.
They
It's like
have a
that's all they
few
had.
maps now,
That's
but
all, but
one
that's all
map.
they had at launch.
Oh
Really,
yeah,
the
for
one map.
years all they
So it's
had was
like
one.
as opposed to the typical PVE or whatever MMO where you got this huge world. So yeah, I
So
guess it
you,
makes sense from a budget standpoint.
so I would understand that like Transformers Universe, perhaps they use like a zone. They just turned a zone into a map, and then that becomes like one of the maps because they do say there's multiple maps, and I believe game modes which people will be able to play. So you still get to play around with the mechanics of the MMO, but sort of in a condensed MOTA experience. And we've seen this happen with games like End of Nations, which we still have yet to see the new version of it. It's supposed to be a MOBA. And then we also saw it with Warhammer Wrath of Heroes, which, those of you who don't know, it basically used the Warhammer Online engine and then condensed it into an arena-style format of PvP. And of course, it got shut down. So it kind of just seems
It
like...
wasn't good. I tried
Yeah,
it.
it wasn't. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. I actually... one of our editors went to Washington to actually play it there, and I felt so bad. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But yeah, so it was pretty bad, and I just worry that when a game is not built to be a MOBA from the get go, you run the risk of in the case of Transformers Universe, you run the risk of you just completely missing any sort of logical mark because that's not what you intended it to be from the get go. To change such abruptly, the focus. Yeah, you can easily just sort of strip down from things and remove some elements to make it like a MOTA. But what's that to say about the confidence of your user base, your fan base, your community? How confident are they going to be that you can change what this originally larger vision of yours into something equally as ambitious and enjoyable, but on a smaller scale budget?
Yeah,
That's what I worry about.
yeah, I mean, and just in general, when you hear about a product that's going to come out, and then they say, well, it's going to be something completely different, you start to wonder, well, do these guys know what the heck they're doing?
Yeah.
It's like if your design, we know how long it takes to make a game. It takes years, and if your design process was okay, it's going to be just like this, and then at some point in the middle you decide after you've announced it and after you've given at least some sort of idea of what it's going to be, you then change it around completely. It's like, well, now you got to start over practically, and now it's going to take even more years to make the game. And it doesn't inspire confidence.
No, especially if we know they lost 13 people on Jagex, and I believe the majority of them were working on the project. So it does sort of feel like they're just trying to get it out the door, if you will. They're just trying to salvage what they can. Hopefully, it does something decently well. But it really just seems like they had to make a decision. Do we scrap what we have and just cancel the project, or we continue it on and just downsize it? And
because one thing to keep in mind there is they paid money for the license, which means that they don't want to scrap it and have nothing to do. You look at something like the agency where SOE had that, and they shut that down, but that was their own thing. They weren't paying a licensor for it, so shutting that down wasn't as big a deal. Same thing with, I guess they are shutting down some other games, but anyway, stuff in development, you don't want to can something in development that you've already paid for an IP.
They may have already promised Hasbro, because of course Hasbro owns the license. Mm-hmm. They may have already promised Hasbro a game. No matter what, they promised them a game. So for them to lose the staff, then they have to still ship something. So we don't really know. That isn't to say that we should discredit the game and say it's a bad game or it's going to be a bad game. It certainly may not be a bad game. It just will not be what they originally intended, and fans will always know that going in. It's not what they originally wanted, and it kind of, I think, just taints it a little bit. Just kind of taints the feeling of it. It's sort of like, yeah, this is fine, but could have been something else.
What if it had been that other thing?
Yeah. Exactly. What if and that's the problem. That is a problem with sort of announcing an MMO when it's not actually ready, because then you can run into issues and then have to completely switch. So that being said, I'm still a Transformers fan. I still will give it a try. I love robots. I love the idea of having a squad of units to control. But there are a couple things that are working against it. The fact that it's in the browser, and the fact that they, even despite it being a browser title, had to scale it back to a MOTA.
Not MOTA. I just keep laughing.
I know. I mean, they really tried not to call it a MOBA. They really tried. But it's still so close that no one's going to refer to it as anything other than a MOBA.
It'd be nice if they would have given us something to go on, some like solid gameplay info other than that one trailer, which was just, maybe
Close-ups.
gameplay assets. Yeah.
We don't know what it is. Is it gameplay assets? Is it cinematic cut to custom animation? We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what it is. But what we do know is that they say that they're going to be more active with the community, going to be talking more, which I guess is all you can see is finally.
They couldn't have talked less.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's technically not true. If they just talk a little bit more than they talked last year, they would technically be telling the truth, I guess.
They already have, yeah.
Yeah, they already have, exactly. They've already told us more than what they told us last year. So, yeah, I mean, it's being a little cynical, but still, there's some truth in this. I feel like the MOBA genre is the only genre that, like, gets things downgraded and shoved into it. Other than, like, mobile genre. Like, the mobile genre, the browser mobile genre get, like, downgraded. They get basically titles and franchises that are no longer used and get turned into, social games. And it seems like the MOBA genre is now getting MMOs and more ambitious RTS titles turned into, these battle action arenas because it's easier to do something in a session-based environment than it is to do in a persistent world.
Speaking of mobile, can we have a moment of silence for Flappy Bird?
Oh, I know, Flappy Bird. You lived and died in such a short time. Rest in peace, you copycat, you. Hey, he was not shameful about it. I mean, you got to hand it to the guy. He, for those who don't know, there was a free-to-play mobile game called Flappy Bird. It was just basically a copy of another game out there. But for some reason, this one, it just got really popular, and the guy got so famous from it that he pulled Eminem. He retired after just a few days. But he was making like $50,000 a day or something.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah,
that's crazy. We're in the wrong business, Jason.
Just make sure to tag this podcast Flappy Bird. Make sure to do that, so we get the SEO traffic.
Oh my gosh, yes, Flappy Bird, Flappy Bird, Flappy Bird.
Flappy Bird, Flappy Bird. Okay.
It's in the comments. All right. Well, going ahead and moving on, we're going to talk a little bit more about another open world MMO. That being one that is not being turned into a MOBA, called, at least I hope so,
or MOTA.
A MOTA, Black Desert. From Pearl Abyss, Korean developer. Now, Black Desert, of course, is like the sandboxed MMO. Where you'll be able to ride horses and have combat on horses and buy your own house that actually has a fixed location, and it's got beautiful graphics, and there's a pretty big amount of hype around it when it was first announced, and we haven't really heard too much information about it coming to the West yet, but we did get a little bit more of a glimpse at the situation behind it and where it is in terms of development. A while back in December or so, we got news that it actually had an English client in the works, although they said at this point there was still no announcement or anything about a Western release. But in a recent interview with Goha.ru, the developers at Pearl Abyss did confirm that they are working on a Russian localization version, but that it would come out before the Western versions of Black Desert, rather. So it's a little bit bittersweet. It means that we did get a confirmation of North American release, but not before Russia. And it kind of struck me as odd. I would think that they would want to push this game out into North America before Russia, but I guess
because America,
like, come on, America. Isn't that usually what we do? We get everything at least second, not third in this case. I don't know. Am I being pretentious?
Maybe a little.
Maybe a little bit? All right. Well, it's getting released in Russia second after Korea, of course. So there is a development of a Russian client, but there is already a development, a English client, like I stated before. What I'm sort of worried about is the developers, when I spoke to them at PAX a while back, they mentioned that probably not have the North American version finished or out until something like 2015 or 16. So you're looking at 2 years at this point, 1 to 2 years, depending on how well it goes. There is the promise of release in Korea, of course, for Black Desert this year, and I'm assuming the Russian version will come shortly after that, relatively speaking. But with such a long time in between versions, and with how MMOs are evolving now and just changing on almost a yearly basis, it seems, I do worry that perhaps by the time we see Black Desert in the West, it will have already missed its sort of prime time opportunity for its mechanics to feel fresh and new. We're sort of moving into the sandbox, space for all MMOs, not only, pay-to-play MMOs like EVE Online, but now free-to-play MMOs like EverQuest Next. And do you think, Jason, that something like Black Desert does have a risk of sort of just falling behind? I mean, traditionally, Korean MMOs have always come out a few years later in the United States. But in the past, there wasn't as much competition for free-to-play MMOs. And a lot of MMOs that were free-to-play did just in general come from Korea. Now, though, that we have Western competition, not only in MMO space, but in much shorter session-based games like MOBAs and shooters and what have you, do you feel as though the localization time sort of hurts the release of Black Desert more than in past years, maybe?
On the one hand, I want to say it's good that they take as long as they're going to, as long as they feel they have to localize, because let's face it, Korean MMOs coming over here have not always been very well localized.
No.
Or very well suited for North American audiences, to put it mildly. But then you have other games, like you say, there's a lot of other competition, even similar games from Korea, games like Archage, games like Bless, games like even Black
Kingdom
Gold.
Under Fire 2 would be another one I could think of.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of games like that have that same kind of look and that same kind of feel that are probably going to come out before 2016 in North America. Although Archage, I can't be sure. That seems like we've been talking about that for like 5 years, it seems like.
It's coming, man. It's coming.
Someday, sure. And yeah, I recognize they're not all exactly the same. Not all Korean games are the same, but they I think tend to appeal to a kind of similar audience. The same people who are always hopeful for that thing that's going to be better than what you have now. That's going to be more than just another typical, like I said, WoW clone or a overhyped license like SWTOR or Elder Scrolls, if you think that way. So there's a strong desire for those games. They just tend to not quite make it to the mass, usually because of either being badly translated, too grindy, or really bad cash op, stuff like that. So you'd like to think that if they're going to take the time, hopefully they'll be able to see what the other games are doing and see. Let's suppose Archage comes out mid 2015 and it just bombs. Why does it bomb? Because it was bad cash shop or bad localization or whatever. Maybe they'll see that and be able to react to that and see, okay, these are the mistakes they made. We're not going to make those. You like to think that, but you never know because they always seem to make the same ones over and over. But in general, to get in a long way back to your opening question, I don't think it's going to really hurt it that badly because it's always going to. We're at the saturation point already, really. I mean, there's enough MMOs. We have enough.
And so that actually, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so just having whenever it comes out, I don't think it really hurts it in a particular way. It might hurt it depending on when exactly it comes out. Like, obviously, you wouldn't want to come out right along the same week as maybe EverQuest Next or some other big game like that. But if they can just avoid other stuff, I don't think the actual long-term time frame is that important.
No, reading some sort of previews from the closed beta that they had in Korea not too long ago, it does seem like there are some interesting elements, like the fact that there are some NPCs that can only be accessed at certain times of the day. They have like day and night cycles. They're not awake essentially at certain times. They're not doing their jobs at certain times. So you have to sort of be mindful of that. And there's the ability, of course, to bid or auction for a permanent house placement that you then find in the world wherever you bought it. It's already there and you own that permanently. But then there's things that are very sort of old style Korean, where there's a lot of grinding involved. Not too many quests currently in the closed beta.
See, even the things you talk about, though, they sound cool. They sound really cool, but they will limit the audience, I think, because you're going to have that thing where, so I have to get in real early to stake my claim on my house, and then that shuts out all later players from coming in. It's like they still have their old school notion, and a lot of them have. When it's that or the grind, it's notion that only the super hardcore, ultra dedicated, 70 hours a week people are going to be able to play this, and that can be fine. But the problem is there just aren't that many people like that nowadays, and that's a mistake that a lot of these games. Age of Wushu was a game that I heard is being being I described as something only for no-lifers. Like that was what someone who played it said. You have to be a no-lifer to play this game, and that's the sort of thing I worry about. Is these games try to be so intricate and have such complex things that they really appeal to those people who absolutely love that, but there just aren't that many of those anymore.
Yeah, I like to draw parallels to because for me I'm sort of worried about the questing essentially. Like
Sure.
okay, you've got these cool elements where you got the nice combat and the cool PvP, or there's like guild versus guild PvP where you have fortresses that you have to defend, and then you even got the housing system, and the animations look amazing. That's great. The problem is if the combat is largely grind based, where you're having to kill a lot of monsters and the quests aren't very rewarding, then you really are compelled to get to the really cool areas or to experience the game in a way that maybe the developers intended more for you to experience it rather than just be stuck on the quest. And I sort of draw parallels to, say, EVE Online, in the sense that EVE Online is a terrible MMO if you look at it from a singular person PvE scenario. Like, if you're just doing quests in EVE Online by yourself with no other support, that MMO is terrible. It's an absolute travesty of a single player MMO. But suddenly you play it in a group and it opens up and it becomes something completely different and much more enjoyable, and certainly something that I would recommend if you're ever into large scale PvP and huge like multi-corporation shenanigans and politics. So if they could sort of capture that with Black Desert, then I would forgive them for the basic questing. But the problem is the longer time that actually comes out, the less you can forgive them for that, because the more we've moved away from that style of questing, perhaps EverQuest Next has come out at that point, like you said, and offer something different or something new that still scratches the itch that Black Desert was trying to scratch, but does it in a way that's less clumsy or grindy like those quests are. There's only so long that you can sort of forgive old mechanics, because in its place you have also these other really awesome mechanics.
Yeah, I could rant on this for probably an hour alone, but yeah, just that the reason we look back on those things fondly is because that's all we had back then, 10 years ago or whatever. That's all there was. You had to grind your face off to get to the good stuff, and companies are starting to realize that maybe if we make the good stuff available earlier and don't make people. I'm not saying everything has to be super casual and you don't have to work for your game or you don't have to be good or whatever, but with so many options to make things more entertaining early on, there's no reason to be unentertained. Because hey, it's a freaking game. Remember, games are supposed to be fun. So
I'm just ready for us to move past and actually have a new defining MMO that isn't World of Warcraft or EVE Online.
Yeah.
Or sorry, not EVE Online, EverQuest rather. In the sense that those are still, after so long, two MMOs that we look back and we can sort of base all current MMO structure on for the most part, except for a few niche MMOs. But the majority of MMOs that still come out still fall within how they sort of popularized it.
I could say this is the point where I just laugh every time someone creams in their pants about WildStar saying they're going to have 40-man raids, but I won't.
You're just like, that's such an old thing they're bringing back, but
you're going to hate it. Trust me. You're not going to want it.
You're not going to want to. You're not going to lead it. Is the more important
that's
thing.
A 40-man raid is like when you used to have like a really crappy job. It's like maybe you made some really good friends because you soldiered through it because it was really hard and sucked. That doesn't mean you want to go back and do it again.
I actually played on a private server on WoW just to experience what 40-man raids are, because I didn't start playing till TBC. And let me tell you, you're right. You feel like a drop in the bucket. You are just one of many faces. You're just one of many small arrows plinking away at a giant health pool.
More dots, more dots.
More dots, yes. All right, well, good way to wrap up that article there with Black Desert. Hopefully it comes out sooner rather than later. I am looking forward to it, but who knows? Maybe it actually will come out before we see Blade and Soul. Apparently that's going to come out this year.
Oh,
but...
yeah, that one too.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and move on to our DeBombs, A-bombs. Me and you, Jason, we're going to tag team this. We got two of them here. I'm going to go ahead and give a DeBomb to Edge of Reality, the developers behind, of course, Loadout, the new customizable FPS/TPS available on Steam now. Go play it. I'm not being paid at all. On the surface, it's a silly shooter, but underneath, it's actually one of the more higher skill-capped shooters I've played in quite a while. And the weapon customization system is quite deep And you can really find, if you play it a lot, find opportunities to have different sets of weapons for different scenarios. At first when I started playing it, it was just about what is the most OP weapon or what is the most OP combo, because you have 2 weapon setups. But then it actually just comes down to the map or the game mode, and a lot of those things do play a factor in what kind of weapons you want to use. And there's a lot of teamwork in the game. There's a surprising amount of teamwork in the game, but that isn't. There's still a lot of like lone wolf. You can really stand out, if you will. I would definitely recommend playing it if you're a fan of Unreal or something like Quake. It's certainly very fast paced and it can be quite twitchy. And yeah, it's certainly becoming one of my more enjoyed games of 2014 now that it has officially released. And I mean, that's not saying much because 2014 just began, but
it's the best game of 2014.
Best game of 2014 right now. I will say that. Best game 2014. What about you, Jason?
I'm going to give an A-bomb.
What's the worst game of 2014? Tell me.
The worst game? The Flappy Bird.
Flappy Bird. Okay, there you go.
All right. I'm going to give an A-bomb to me for being an awful, awful Hearthstone player. It's like I had a game yesterday, an arena game. I had 4 wins, my best arena. I could have had 5. That would have been my best arena match so far. And I could have won the game if I just read the freaking cards in my hand. And I just got such tunnel vision on doing something else, trying to take out his minions instead of attacking him, that I just crapped all over myself.
What was it? What was the card that you didn't read?
It's a card that doubles the attack on one of your minions. And I didn't realize
Were you playing a paladin?
Yes, I was. And I would have had just enough to take out all his life. He had like 18, but I could have done all of that in one turn. But I had 1 health, so I had been concentrating for like 3 turns to keep his minions low, just trying to survive. But I do stuff like that more than I'm surprised at how often I'll do silly mistakes like that. I want to say it's because I don't know all the cards intimately, because I never had this problem when I was playing like Magic.
Mm-hmm.
After my first, I felt like my first couple of weeks of Magic, after I played that, I knew what all the cards did, and if something was on the table, I could at least figure it out from there. And I never felt like I made a tactical mistake, but now it's just like every 4 or 5 games, I do some just idiotic thing. And I don't know if part of it is the fact that lack of tactile, that I don't have cards actually in my hand that I can sort of sort through, or if it's that time limit that I keep thinking I'm up against, or just even wanting to play quickly so that my opponent doesn't think I'm a total noob. I don't know. It just confuses me sometimes more than it should, and it really ticks me off. I give myself an A-bomb for it.
I'm sorry to hear that, Jason. Hopefully you can go to maybe a Hearthstone support group.
Hi, my name is Jason, and I'm a paladin.
I'm a paladin. Hi, Jason.
That's the other thing. It was the first time I played paladin, even. So it was
your first time in arena as a paladin, huh?
Yeah.
Do you go?
My first time playing as a paladin. In any case.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, do you actually use any of the professional tier lists online? Do you go by any of those?
No, I didn't know about those.
Oh, you should probably go by those. It tells you which cards are the best cards to pick in
I don't need that. I don't know that. I'm a good player. I know all that stuff.
Oh, really? You don't want to learn? You don't want to raise your game, if you will?
I can raise my own game. I don't need
Here first, guys. You can raise... He could have been a pro basketball player, but he decided to raise his own game.
No, I'm a terrible shooter.
Oh, boy. That he is. No, I'm just kidding.
Moving on.
I'm just kidding, Jason. All right, so moving on here, we actually are going to go and move to the question of the week. So the question of the week last week was, outside of questing, what other areas do you think MMORPGs need to improve upon the most? So outside of questing, which we know is always one of the biggest things people want to see improved, what area did you want to see improved? V2099 said he had them listed. Itinerary: 1. Farming. 2. PvP. 3. Crafting. He said developers need to make modes per se. For instance, Dota 2, they released the ability draft mode, and a few of my friends and I have only been playing that, and players need something to curb the monotony, that's all. And it's sort of interesting, he does make a point in that it would be nice to see more modes in MMOs that don't just rely on the individual player's abilities, sort of, give you a new set of abilities or a new scenario, or basically a game within a game, or a game mode within a game, rather. I can definitely see that as being something interesting to sort of break it up a little bit, because I think everybody's used to hitting the same skills the same time. No matter if you're doing PvP or PvE, you're still using skills that you're familiar with. But to sort of change it up and use skills that aren't necessarily based on your hero or your class would certainly allow you to change up your playstyle without having to roll a brand new class, maybe.
Like, say, arena mode in Hearthstone.
Exactly. Exactly, but you don't really get that in an MMO.
Well, the one thing I was thinking of, I actually was making up rules for this for Guild Wars 2. I was going to do, I was going to call it Guild Wars Z, and it was going to be kind of based on like DayZ.
Oh yeah?
And I was going to go into a zone completely naked, except for like one weapon, one common weapon, and I have to like survive in the zone with whatever I found, whatever armor, whatever weapons, whatever I find. I think they actually put in kind of like a little Hunger Games mini game, just sort of like that in Guild Wars 2, and that would be cool. I think they have some sort of MMO mode, whether it's PvP or PvE, where you basically start with nothing and you have to just use what you find.
That's quite interesting, I would have to say. It's almost like starting anew with an MMO, but instead of starting anew, you're just in a very intense.
I mean, you still have to have you still have to have your class.
Yeah, exactly. You still have all your abilities and what have you. I don't know.
Or maybe you don't. Maybe you don't have your abilities.
Maybe you don't.
Maybe you have like
one
or two abilities or whatever. You have a weapon. Maybe you can find how to get more abilities or something.
That would be cool. Being able, instead of actually being, you would still be like a starting class and maybe have a starting ability or so, but you would find abilities out in the world. You know what we're talking about? We're talking about Path of Exile. That's what we're talking about. Because you find abilities in Path of Exile, you can be anything in that game.
Well, true. Yeah. I'm talking like a separate mode, because once you get up to max level in Path of Exile, you've got. Technically you can keep going along that grid, I suppose, but
you could change up the actual abilities that you use.
Sure.
Per se. I don't know. Let us know in the comments how you would actually change PvP in MMOs. I'm curious if you could add on to V2099's mod, because I do agree that changing up what you have access to in MMO, other than doing the same thing with your character just in different scenarios, would be nice. But I don't really know how to actually accomplish that. And I guess you could say SWTOR did it a little bit with the expansion, where they added the space PvP in Galactic Starfighter. Whether or not that was successful remains to be seen. I personally didn't enjoy it, but other players have, I've heard. Moving on, we have another comment here from Mega17. I don't know why I almost said Mega64. Mega17. Jason, why don't you go ahead and talk about what he said?
All right. The aspect I would like to see MMOs improve or add to is personal story. Guild Wars 2's personal story, for the most part, was very fun and an enjoyable part of leveling up. It is something I miss whenever I try other MMOs. I would like to see more MMOs offer personal storylines with unique beginnings, choices, and endings of many varieties, preferably without being locked in morality and allowing us to decide who to trust and who to betray. Mega17, I completely disagree. Okay, maybe not completely. I guess I don't want to see as much personal story in MMOs. I don't mind having an overall story, but I think that sort of thing is just better handled by a single player game. I don't think we've seen it in SWTOR. It's like it was fun, but it was primarily a solo activity. Same with Guild Wars 2. Yeah, you can have other people in there to do it with you, but to me, that's not what an MMO is about. It kind of detracts. It just kind of detracts from the other stuff, and it gives you more to do. Yeah, I know, and it's always nice to have more to do, but I'd rather see a more focused effort on the other parts of the game. Like we talked about, SWTOR didn't have a whole lot to do at endgame. Maybe that's because they invested a lot of time and a lot of money in developing all that personal story stuff.
And the personal story stuff was interesting maybe the first time you did it, but then it was all the same every time after that.
Well, SWTOR, at least you can have a different class. You'll have 8 different stories to work through.
True, but
Guild Wars 2 I thought was a little more. I've made so many alts that maybe I can't tell the difference, but whatever.
But even in the sense of like the dungeons, they were the same every time.
Yes.
You could have slightly different, dialogue options, but those were pretty well exhausted after just a couple run-throughs. And there wasn't really a lot of impact to choosing one or another, other than basically adding points to your light side or your dark side. But yeah, I can certainly see where it would be nice to feel like you have more of an individual impact on the game. But I don't think that's done through, like you were talking about, Jason, I don't think that would be done through story or dialogue. If it was more like instancing, perhaps, like it would show like a statue or something with your name on it because you were someone who, defeated this or whatever. And whenever you entered this area, that was the statue that you saw, but everybody else saw a different statue. Those are ways that I think they can sort of insert a story and immersion that is specifically based on your input without it.
I don't even like that, because that just seems too much like that just seems too much like phasing. Like we see different things in the world. That's like if there's a statue in a city, it should be a statue of whatever. It shouldn't change depending on who looks at it. I don't know.
I think that actually works really well though in a sandbox environment, just having one instance for sure. But if anything that is story driven, I think that it wouldn't be more instance based. It would be more like what's a theme park based, if you will. But who knows? Maybe someone can pull off a really good story sandbox MMO. But you know what the best story mode sandbox MMO there is? Oh, okay, it's not the best. EVE Online. No, I'm just going back. No, making your own stories in sandbox MMOs actually, I think, end up being some of the best personal stories ever to grace the pages or the digital world. Because those are the ones that are made by the players. And I certainly think me and you, Jason, we can agree that is a good personal story when it is one that you craft yourself, not someone crafted by you.
Yeah. For
you, rather, not by you.
Which again, they're fine. I think personal stories are fine in single-player games, just not as good in MMOs.
Sure. For sure. That's just his legal way of saying that. Like he has to say that, otherwise there's legal implications. He has to say that. But going on, we do have a response from Shasso33 as well as Daniel, and they actually sort of said the same thing. They mentioned that crafting and like basically full weaponsmithing is something that they both wanted to really see embellished upon and added to. I'd have to agree. Shasso33 said outside of questing, crafting needs to be improved in MMOs. All you really do is sort of gather the resources and then click a button to make the item. That's true even in EverQuest Landmark or EverQuest Next. Mm-hmm. Crafting in that MMO is simply you put the items together, you gather them, you hit the button, it does a bar, and then you have the item in your inventory. Things like actual full weaponsmithing would be actually pretty awesome, where you sharpen the blade and perhaps you craft how the blade looks using voxels or whatever the kids want to use these days in their MMOs. But yeah, if you actually, the better you craft it, the better you make it, and you do it with the materials, then perhaps the better the blade actually comes out. I think that weaponsmithing would be actually a pretty awesome thing to add to MMOs. I would have to agree with Shasso33. Go ahead.
I'll give my point of view. I do agree that I think crafting should be more than just gather mats and press a button to make the exact same thing. I'm a little iffy about making it totally a skill-based game because some people are just not going to be very good at that. And I know it's like, well, then get better, noob, or something like that. But I don't want it to be that you have to have the skill of, a perfect kind of, whatever it is. Like if it's a timing thing, you have to have perfect timing to get the best loot. I guess that's my point of it. If it's a cosmetic thing, maybe. But in terms of the actual, having to do that to make a better thing, not to mention that, quite honestly, that is fun, maybe the first 2 or 3 times. But when you have to make, 20 swords to advance your level, do you want to go through all these actions every single time or whatever?
Well, maybe that's the problem with how they did the progression then. Maybe you shouldn't make 20 swords, I could definitely see, because the risk that you run by adding in sort of more depth to crafting is making it tedious, is making it, like you said, do you want to do that action 20 times? It has to feel like you're doing something important, not that you're just doing something as a mini game, essentially. It has to have some sort of importance. You have to be able to craft the weapon in a certain way to get the certain effects that you want. Maybe if you craft it a different way, it just makes different effects. So that's, how you choose to make the blade is dependent on how you want it to come out. But yeah, I do think that something along those lines would be much better than just simply watching a progression bar.
Yes, to that end, I will say that I'm actually going to have an article on Elder Scrolls Online crafting going up on another site in a day or two. Mm-hmm. And I do like how they have things. They have it set up that you've got basically a bunch of different sliders you can affect based on what kind of mats you have and so on. So it's like you open your weaponsmithing bar, you're going to choose the weapon, and you're going to choose the racial style, and you're going to choose what level it is, you're going to choose the special ability or whatever, so you get to kind of just go along each of those to figure out what you want. So it's really allows you to customize it quite a bit, and it's better than just put 4 materials together to get a +1 flaming sword, put 4 different materials together to get a +3 ice sword or whatever.
Yeah, I would almost say if there was something like Loadout in an MMO, whereby you had different quality components, and by putting
that does sound like it, yeah.
Yeah, you put different quality components together, you get a different type of blade or a different type of weapon out of that with different effects or different stats based on what you put together in these configurations. It certainly seems like a next step to take. But the question of this week then, just going to go to move on, we'll go ahead and set the question up for next week. It's going to be, can MMOs actually keep up with gaming trends, or will they always feel like they're left behind? So basically, guys, what I mean by this is, in the past, MMOs, of course, were a little bit more new to people. The genre was new, and the idea of a 3D realm such as EverQuest was a very exciting one. But now that we've seen MMOs sort of do the same thing for a while, but other games, new genres crop up, and new ideas, new cool features added to games, do we feel as though MMOs can actually keep up with that? Can they be revolutionary once more like they were in the past as the genre? Or will they always feel behind? Will they always feel like the combat isn't quite as good as a single-player experience, or the overall experience is just not quite as focused or honed as, say, a single-player game would be? So go ahead and let me know in the comments below what you guys think about that. You can also just email me your response at michael@mmobomb.com. But otherwise, if you want to reach me personally, you can do so at @Spunkify on Twitter. And just always give me a shout in the comments or on the forums. Now, Jason, for you, how do people want to reach you if they want to talk to you about whatever we talk about?
They want to find me on Twitter @WinterInformal, streaming at twitch.tv/JasonWinter, and occasionally blogging at jasonwinter.wordpress.com.
Maybe we'll face off one day in Hearthstone, Jason. Me versus
Just
you.
randomly?
Just randomly, or maybe on the stream. Maybe we'll do a duels one day. Duels, you know? It's time to duel.
Oh, thanks, you.
Oh, really? No, I was just a stutter. Sorry, I was just stuttering.
Okay.
All right, guys. Until next time, we'll see you guys later. Spotify out.